channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Friday and I have a thrift flip for you guys. I grabbed a couple little nightstands that I'm sure you saw me pick up on our last junk run. I think I paid $3.99 a piece for them and I gave them a really cute makeover. I can't wait to show them to you guys, and without further ado, let's get to today's project. So these are the little nightstands that I picked up on our most recent junk run. And I think I only paid $3.99 for these guys each. And then I also had a 20% off coupon. So they were extremely inexpensive. And they've been sitting in my kitchen and they're kind of in the way. So I figured I would just go ahead and get them cleaned up and painted and out on my floor. So I'm starting by taking off the hardware and then giving these guys each a really good bath. They were a little bit dusty and I'm just using some crud cutter, wiping that off and then following that up with some clean water just to make sure that none of the crud cutter residue is left behind on these tables before I start painting. Now, I have to admit, I had a bit of a hard time choosing a color. My main focus was trying to pick something that would transition well for summer, then into fall possibly, and maybe even into Christmas. And so I went ahead and grabbed Sweet Pickins milk paint in the color Basil. Now, I know not all of you are on board with green, but it is one of my favorite colors. And so I decided to go ahead and paint both of these with this beautiful green. Now, if you've never used milk paint before, it is a powdered paint that you add water to mix it up. And the recommended amount is 1 part paint to 1 part water. I like to use pretty piping hot water with mine. So I usually mix mine in 1/4 cup batches because that's just what I have next to my sink. And so I put a 1/4 cup of milk paint in a little cup, and then I put a 1/4 cup of piping hot water in there with it. And then I use a little milk frother and mix it up really, really well. That helps avoid the chunkiness that can be caused by the milk paint. Once you have it mixed, it should be the consistency roughly of a melted milkshake. And then you need to just let it set for 10 to 15 minutes before you jump in and start painting your piece. The other thing to know about milk paint is that if you're going over a slick surface like these little tables, you might want to consider adding Extra Bond. Milk paint's the only paint I know of that can give you a chippy finish, and the chippy factor kind of depends on the surface that it's going over and the finish that you're going over. Slicker surfaces, more of your milk paint is going to chip off. If you're going over just raw wood, you probably don't need any of the Extra Bond. So on these, I used the recommended amount of Extra Bond and I added it to all of my coats of paint. And the Extra Bond is half the amount of water or paint that you're using. So for these, I used about 1/8 of a cup of Extra Bond in all of my batches of paint. And I add the Extra Bond after I have the paint mixed up with my little hand mixer. So I just add it in to my paint and mix it up again with the little milk frother. And then again, just let the paint sit for 10 to 15 minutes before I start painting. Now, milk paint is definitely a little thinner than the DIY clay-based paint, so I went over these with 3 good coats of paint. I probably could have gotten away with 2. You can see here as I'm going over these with the second coat, it looks pretty darn good, but I always like to smooth my pieces out by sanding them, so I added a 3rd coat of paint just because I didn't want to accidentally sand through my paint down to the wood underneath. One of the things I love about milk paint is that it is a self-leveling paint, so it dries pretty darn smooth. The only little thing with it is as the paint sits, sometimes it tends to get little clumps in it, and those clumps get painted onto your piece, and I like a very, very smooth finish, so I always take mine outside and give it a little bit of sanding once I'm done painting, just to make sure that none of those little clumps are stuck to my paint. So for this, I'm using some 220 grit sandpaper. It's actually used 220 grit sandpaper, so there's not a lot of grit to it at all. And I've got my orbital sander on its lowest setting, and I'm just carefully going over all of the flat surfaces to make sure that there are no little clumps of paint stuck behind. I'm really not trying to do a whole heck of a lot of distressing on these, just really trying to make them nice and smooth. Now, since I'm going to be adding a transfer to the top of these, I wanted to make darn sure that I got all of the sanding dust off of them. So I'm just wiping them down really quick with a damp shop towel to get all of that sanding dust removed. Now it's finally on to the fun part of this project, starting with the transfer. The transfer I'm going to be using today is called Pastels Artistry. It's one of the beautiful new transfers by Redesign with Prima. It's a Middy transfer, so you get these 3 sheets. All of them are 8.5 by 11. So I decided which ones I wanted to use on the tops of these tables, peeled off the backing, laid it down where I wanted it, and then I began using my transfer stick to adhere that transfer to my table. Now, another beautiful thing about milk paint is it is an easy paint to apply transfers to, which is very, very helpful. So as you can see, if you've never applied a transfer before, I am simply rubbing over the image really well using that transfer stick and then slowly peeling up that piece of vellum, being careful not to pull up any of the pieces of transfer with it. Once I've got the transfer down where I want it and it's nice and smooth, I go over it with that piece of vellum just kind of flipped upside down and re-rub the transfer just to get out any air bubbles and make sure it's burnished down into my piece really well. For the second transfer on this piece, there was a little piece that I didn't really like because it was too long, so I went ahead and cut that off. And then same procedure, just going to put this transfer where I want it, rub it with the transfer stick, peeling up that piece of vellum until my transfer is completely adhered. Once I finished with my first table, I set my second table next to it and placed my transfers so that they were kind of a mirror image of the other table. Then I did the same procedure on this one as the last and applied both of my transfers to the top of the table, making sure to burnish them both in very, very well. Once I have my transfers down, it is time to seal my paint. Like the DIY paint, this is a natural product that does require sealing. And my favorite sealer for the milk paint is definitely the Sweet Pickins oil wax. So I grabbed my bottle of clear oil wax. I put some into a little container and I am just applying a thin coat of that all over this piece with a chip brush. Once that's done, I let them sit for about 15-20 minutes with that oil wax on them. And then I'm just coming back with a dry shop towel and wiping off all of the excess wax. The key is just making sure that you get all of the wax removed. And I normally go over my pieces a couple times. I end up using a few of these shop towels just to make sure they're as dry as possible. Next up, I decided to give these guys a little bit of shading and shadowing using DIY's black wax. So I'm going in first with a little bit of wax mixed with mineral spirits and just going over my flat surface. And then once I wipe that back, I'm going and adding just a little bit more of the black wax around the areas where I want to add a little bit of shadowing. Then I'm using a shop towel and just dabbing that wax back off, just to leave enough so that it looks like it's a little bit grungy and aged. Now, since I had already waxed this piece with the clear oil wax, the black wax didn't really soak into the paint. It definitely gave just a hint of patina, except of course in the areas where I purposefully made it a little bit darker. The exception to that was in the wood grain. These little tables had pretty defined wood grain to them in places, and it was kind of neat because the black wax actually kind of filled in the wood grain to some respect and really made it stand out. And I thought it was just a really pretty effect. So I'm very happy that I chose to use this black wax on this piece. Now, in all honesty, you could have skipped the black wax step and these tables looked just fine. And the next step you could absolutely skip as well if you're not a fan of gold. However, I just wanted to add a little bling factor to these tables. So I grabbed my Decor wax by Redesign with Prima. This one is called Eternal. And with my finger, I am just going around the edge of this table and very carefully adding a layer of this gold wax. Then I went around the bottom of the table. I am really sorry about my light. I didn't realize it was right in the way, and it looks like my camera was focusing on it and not on what I was doing there. But anyway, then I grabbed the drawers, gave them a coat of the black wax as well, and wiped that back. And then I went around the very rim of these with a coat of that Eternal wax as well. Once that was done, all that was left was to give the hardware a little bit of paint. So I painted it a really pretty gold using a Rustoleum spray paint, attached it, and then these little tables are done, and I love how they came out. Well, I think that's it from here for today, you guys. I hope you liked my project and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit that little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of my little nightstand makeover. I know not all of you are in Camp Green. Some of you really would rather I do everything blue. So for you, I'm sure there will be blue on the horizon. But in the meantime, you can get any of the paint products I used today on my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. And I just wanted to mention that for the month of May, Sweet Pickins Milk Paint is offering 35% off their color called Ocean. I'm going to show that to you. It's this beautiful kind of blue-green definitely reminds me of the ocean. It's a very, very pretty color. And so if you go to my website, this color is 35% off through the end of May. So just thought I'd let you know. I'm going to try to paint one of the little tables that I have sitting in my kitchen with this color, just so you kind of get a feel for what it looks like in real life. And plus, I really need to get all of the little tables that are sitting around in my kitchen out of there. So I'm trying to work on them. For Tuesday's video, I've already started working on another one of the end tables. I'm not sure if I'm going to have it done in time. We'll see how tomorrow goes. But if not, it will be a thrift haul. We're definitely going to go out on a junk run on Sunday. So either or, we'll see what happens, you guys. But it'll be fun no matter what. So I hope you'll join me back here on Tuesday for that. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I will see you all on Tuesday. Bye.